I'm Captain Greg Darrow. I'm the Vice President of Sales Marketing for CPAT Global. I have a long history of airline training in both the pilot side and the general instruction across flight operations. And joining me today is Mr. Stephen Gatlin, who has many, many years of cabin crew and flight operations instruction. I'll let Stephen introduce himself.
Good morning and good afternoon. And my name is Stephen Gatlin.
Stephen, I'm sorry, your mic is you're muted there, buddy.
You should be able to hear me.
Oh,
Do you have that muted?
nope, still not hearing.
Try it now.
Sorry, folks, just a technical difficulty. Give me 1 second here, and I will. All right, and Stephen, go ahead. Let's see if we got you loud and clear.
All right, can you hear me now, folks?
Yeah. All right. Welcome,
All right.
Stephen.
Very good. Thanks for the introduction, Greg. My name is again Stephen Gatlin. I'm the Cabin Crew Training Program Director here at CPAT. I've been a cabin crew member since 1985, going back to Boeing 707 DC-8 days. I've taught many, many initial and recurrent ground schools for flight attendants, cabin crew, and have been a check airman for many, many years on board. Almost 10,000 hours of log classroom instruction for cabin crew. So you all will be in very good hands today.
So, folks, again, thank you for joining. We wanted to go through a number of subjects today. Part of our CPAT Discovery webinar series is meant to help keep our clients and our colleagues in the industry informed on different methodologies and best practices we're seeing in the industry, as well as giving updates on what CPAT is doing. And when we see new and informative information that is out there that we think would be helpful to you, we like to also present that. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to start with talking about some of the ways we see distance learning being applied in the cabin crew training arena to help save money, as many airlines have already implemented distance learning for their pilot side of the house and saved money over many years. It's not as prevalent in the cabin crew side. And there's two ways to use distance learning, as we all know. You can use distance learning to replace regulatory hours of training in the classroom and bring that out to distance learning, or you can just use it as an augmented training tool. Today, we're going to focus on what we're seeing clients utilize distance learning for in an augmented situation, not as a replacement. That doesn't mean that you can't utilize this as a replacement to regulatory training, but today our focus of our discussion is going to be augmentation. And we're going to talk about two main scenarios. One is creating an assessment tool in utilizing a week of pre-class training as a way to screen strong strong students and weak students, and we'll go into that scenario with Stephen because he has a lot of experience with that. And then the second one is to create a pre-study curriculum that allows your students to be better prepared for the day that they start their in-class training. And then the third scenario, we'll talk about the benefits of blending those two together to get the most out of your e-learning services. I'll show you a little bit about what how CPAT Invent will allow you to create those scenarios and curriculums to support those scenarios. And then Stephen just returned from the FAA Cabin Safety Research Workshop, and there was a lot of really cutting edge and advanced subjects taught at that I thought it would be really important to bring that out today and have a discussion about it, so you can see some of the cutting edge things that the regulators are working on for improving cabin crew training. We'll finish up with some questions and answers. As Miss Amy mentioned, you can type your questions, or we can have you speak on the webinar If you'd like to voice your question, it's no problem. At any time, don't forget, you can raise your hand as we go through the webinar. This is meant to be a discussion of a webinar. So at any time, don't be hesitant to interrupt when I'm speaking. And in fact, I think let's double check here. I'm just going to make sure we don't have any hands raised at the moment. All right. So let's start with discussing what we talked about is ways to reduce your training costs utilizing distance learning. Before I go there, I'm going to do a quick review of everything that CPAT does for those of you who aren't as familiar with CPAT's portfolio of products. So we organize everything we do into 4 main pillars, and that's CPAT Access. That's our learning portal that includes our learning management system or delivery platform, both online and offline using the CPAT mobile app. We have a student verification system that's a biometric verification system, and our universal API that connects our systems up to other training systems. CPAT Instruct, which is some of the stuff we'll be looking at today, that includes aircraft systems for pilots and cabin crew, general subjects and safety subjects for pilots and cabin crew, interactive diagrams to learn advanced procedures or advanced systems for the pilots, procedural training for both pilots and cabin crew. And I'll go into in a second a full description of what we have in our cabin crew inventory. CPAT Invent, that's our content design software program that allows you to build new courseware inside of CPAT and then be able to deliver it, as well as modify the courseware that CPAT has created or that you can create. And then finally, CPAT Assist. This is our industry-leading student support and admin support services. So when you look at CPAT's cabin crew training portfolio, it's organized into 3 different categories. The aircraft systems or cabin crew aircraft system courses. That includes CPAT's aircraft systems courses for fleet-specific systems knowledge that is relevant to cabin crew. And that includes, everything that you would need to know: communication systems, escape path lighting systems, cabin control panels, oxygen systems. So it's not taking a pilot aircraft system course and then modifying it to fit into a cabin crew curriculum. It's actually specifically designed aircraft system courses for cabin crew. And that includes the full fleet spectrum: Boeing's, Airbus, ATR, CRJ, and Embraer aircraft fleet types. Then we also have our library of cabin crew safety courses that Stephen has built. And this is always growing. We're going to be expanding dramatically, but that includes interactive and in-depth safety and general subjects for cabin crew, including safety demonstration lessons, dangerous goods lessons or hazmat lessons, first aid, crew resource management, security, emergency procedures. Some of the things Stephen's working on is also fatigue risk management and SMS and some other programs that are going to be added to this library at any time. It would be nice also if you have some that you would suggest that we add, just chat into the webinar here, and we'll add it to our list of things to review. And then finally, our cabin crew interactive trainers. That includes our interactive 3D trainer, which I'll demonstrate for you today. And then in the near future, our interactive 3D door trainers. And so we'll talk a little bit more about those, but I just wanted to give you a quick overview of what CPAT does in our portfolio of products for cabin crew. So let's get into those, how to reduce your training costs with distance learning solutions for cabin crew training. So as we talked about, there are some subjects that lend themselves to distance learning, and they work well, and that's whether that's a regulatory replacement for classroom training or whether that's just augmentation training. Some courses such as hazmat, basic in-dock subjects, general aircraft ground systems courses, those lend themselves well for being outside of the classroom or being used online or offline for training. Whereas other courses, they would not apply very well to distance learning, such as CRM or hands-on first aid. And we know that the discussion today is about those subjects where we either can move them completely out of the classroom, or we can provide augmentation training prior to the students get there so that they have a better training outcome when they come there. Now, Stephen put together this review as data shows that 23% of cabin crew training students don't progress past training. So we lose about 23% of the new hire candidates, and that's an industry-wide average. Your average could be higher or lower, but losing any potential candidate at this time is one, expensive on our training budget, but two, we want them to be successful, and it's important to be able to keep the dedicated human resources that we found that want to be in this industry and make them successful, right? So some of the benefits is you can, by utilizing distance learning, as we're going to show you, is you can recognize stronger or weaker candidates when you're as a screening process. You can offload some of your training from the classroom and save money on travel costs, hotel expenses, per diem. And you can also free up some of your training assets to do other training events, such as your facilitators, your classrooms, your hard equipment, such as, first aid training rooms and such. But so let's talk about how I would do that. And in our scenarios, I'm going to actually review some of this, and Stephen's going to expound on it from his experience. So as we talked about, one of the things that's so costly is that we have students that come into our classrooms as new hire cabin crew, and they don't know what they're getting into, and we don't know their commitment to this industry until they arrive at the training center. And now we spent a lot of money getting them. So we can use the distance learning to create an assessment system by giving certain subjects and giving certain tests and checking certain punctuality using distance learning. So Stephen, in your experience with your training at both the 121 and the 142 level, training other airlines students, how could I use a week of assessment prior to students coming to class, and what benefits would I see from doing that? And from your experience.
Well, Greg, that's a very good question. In my experience, we don't know a lot about the new hires that are coming into our class. We don't understand and know their study habits. We don't know their level of dedication. So what we would use is a 7-day or a 5-day or a 40-hour introductory course. Maybe it covers airport codes, city codes, a little bit of aircraft parts, 24-hour clock, things that don't need to be taught in the classroom. And we could assign them this course prior to their arrival. We can have them take a test, and if they pass the test, generally speaking, is 80% or above, then we know they have the skills, the study habits, and the dedication, where we don't have to bring them in, give them the same kind of training, the same subjects in a classroom, and have them fail and score maybe a 62% on a written exam, and we have to send them home. So we're able to spend a lot of our training budget for later on down the training. It's very little risk for an airline to provide some form of online training, give some form of assessment, because we don't have to pay for hotel and per diem and transportation and so on. Plus, number two, it's a great way for us to weed out the chaff, if you will. For those who are not going to make it, we can free up a seat for someone who maybe has more dedication.
Sure. So as you mentioned, you're able to determine, without utilizing this tool, without having to spend, expensive training dollars or travel dollars, to determine whether they, a lot of new hire cabin crew people, they have a dream of what being a flight attendant is like. And then when they arrive, they don't realize, well, it's a lot of hard work and it's a lot of dedication. And as we talked about, you have to be punctual. So I can kind of test that stuff out when utilizing this tool. Is that correct?
That's correct. We could have a exam or quiz or assessment at the end and have a threshold, maybe 90% is a pass rate or 80% is a pass rate. Have them take this assessment at the very end. It's a non-Jeopardy event. It's not a regulatory event, but we will know from their test results, have they really and truly studied, and do they have what it takes to become a licensed cabin crew member?
Yeah, absolutely. I could even use this, if you think about it, Stephen. I could use this even as a pre-hire assessment tool before I even make that commitment. And I mean, again, there's almost no cost to this. It's an internally created curriculum utilizing CPAT courseware as well as developed courseware by the airline utilizing CPAT Invent. And I can get all those benefits, even of screening those students before I even have to make a commitment, whether it's dollars or whether it's employment. Right?
You're exactly right. And there are some airlines receive about 16,000 applications a day for maybe one of 40 seats. So it's very, very competitive. And using a screening tool such as what we're talking about here would kind of help to weed out some of those that may not make it.
So now let's look at scenario 2, and that's for the airline that they don't want to use this as a screening tool, but as you've talked about in your past, boy, I sure would like to give them as much of a chance to be successful when they show up at a very complex and intense training course by providing them with pre-study material, a chance to get ahead of the more complex material on their own time at no cost to the airline by providing them, a week of pre-study material. Can you describe how airlines do that, or and how the benefits are, how they play out for the airlines?
Sure. So for an example is maybe we have a very complex subject matter. It might be with say aircraft parts of the aircraft. They need to know, for example, what is an engine cowling, what is an aileron, what is a flap, what is a vertical stabilizer, and even something like that. So if they can get ahead of the ball by studying this material ahead of time, and they are preloading their knowledge bank. So when they go into the classroom, they will have a much higher success rate if they've already seen the material. It might even be as complicated, for example, as to some of the more modern ovens that are in galleys. They're complicated pieces of equipment. If they can master how to program a steam oven on a Boeing 787, when they go to the classroom and learn this, again, they are preloaded with this material and they'll have a great understanding and a firm foundation. They even go down to maybe the basics of first aid. If you understand the basics of first aid, and maybe you have an 8-hour distance learning course on first aid, then you go into the classroom for the hands-on. Now you have a really firm foundation.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen this on the pilot side for many, many years, where things like, non-regulatory basic indoc subjects are put out there prior to the student arriving. As you talked about, CPAT's aircraft system courses for cabin crew, you could push that out to the pre-study course, let them be ready so that when they come into the classroom and you're having a discussion about aircraft configurations, lighting, oxygen, things like that, they're heads up versus heads down trying to, understand all of this. There, as we talk about, you've mentioned many times, getting their situational awareness as big as possible so that they're actually part of the class versus, deer in the headlights because the material's so new and coming at them and never seen any of it. Now, go ahead. I'm sorry, Stephen.
Right. From a facilitator standpoint, if they are preloaded with material, for example, talking about maybe the aircraft's oxygen system for passengers, if they're preloaded with this information, and they understand it, and we verify it by way of a quiz, for example. They go into the classroom, they're watching me and the presentation on the screen versus having to be down and taking all their notes. They've already done that. So for me, if they're able to watch my presentation, listen to what I have to tell them, their note taking is greatly reduced because they've already taken notes back home when they were doing the distance learning course. So it saves us a lot of frustration, so we can free up our time for more in-person teaching and drilling down to those deeper subjects versus having to continuously answer questions because they saw it in a manual, they saw it in a handout, they saw it on the screen, and they start bombarding the facilitator with questions.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and what we saw in, I'll date myself, I've been in pilot training since the 80s. What we saw as distance learning became more of a standard, you know, especially with this pre-distance learning type stuff in the pilot side of flight operations, was a dramatic increase in successful outcomes. I had a lot less remedial training. I didn't have to send people back through ground school because they got 79 on the systems on their basic knowledge test. You know, everybody had a much more successful position, which is important to us because we're asking these people to come to work for our airline and we want them to be successful. You know, we're not hiring people to fail, we're hiring them to be successful. And by utilizing this, you know, you should see a much higher increase of successful outcomes, as well as a significant reduction in new hire attrition.
That's correct.
All right, sorry guys, we just had so we did have a question. Stephen, I'm going to ask you a question. Thank you, folks, for submitting questions. And again, happy to take them at any time during the seminar. It said, if an application is taking a course, can they, during this pre-study, if they're taking the course, can they go back? Can they review the material? Is there any reason to shut it off the day they get there? Well,
no, they were able to go back and review material as much as they wish, because remember, they're drinking from that proverbial fire hose. And there's so much material being given to them that if they have distance learning, they can go back and maybe in the hotel room that evening or wherever kind of review the material if they feel they don't have an understanding on the subject well enough to pass an assessment. So being able to review material is great.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we haven't talked about, and we'll go back to this, we'll go to the next scenario. One of the things we haven't talked about is new hire. Let me ask you this. You know, a lot of the young folks that come to start with us, this is their first real serious job, right? And it's an important job to them. Most of them view this as a career and a lifelong dream. How nervous are these people when they show up, Stephen?
They're very nervous. They show up, everybody is dressed professionally. Maybe they've been coached on how to dress, how to do their hair, how to do their makeup, their shoes. And for the first couple of days, it's very, very quiet until such time they break off in their own teams. They become melded one group. They study together to become lifelong friends. So they are nervous. They're nervous because they don't know what to expect.
Exactly. So their stress level is high, but by giving them this pre-study material, they're able to do it in their own time, in their own environment, under a more relaxed environment. So they're able to absorb the material instead of day one, you know, as we all did the day we were first hired at the airline, right? And we were all a little bit scared and overwhelmed. You know, this, you know, you can use this in many ways to affect that successful training outcome, right? So.
And again, also, they may get into the meat and potatoes of the learning and say, hey, this is really not for me.
Yeah,
and they would weed themselves out, which, you know, prevents us from having to be a little bit tough and weed them out of class.
Yeah, and so that brings us to scenario 3, which I think is the right one, which is you utilize both scenarios. You utilize this as a way to test the strength and the weakness of candidates and allow the weaker candidates to be identified, whether they self-identify and decide this isn't for them, or whether we identify them by saying, boy, it's just not it doesn't seem that this is a good fit before we spend critical dollars or take up a classroom seat where somebody that is stronger can be in there. The other one is we're able to, by utilizing both scenarios, I'm able to put these together and now provide all of them with the ability to pre-study in their own time, their own environment, in a relaxed method to absorb the material. So when they come into day one, their heads are up, they're not overstressed, they know what's coming at them, and we can really be, empowering them to have a successful training. And for us, we end up with better numbers on successful flight attendants making it through training and making it to the line, right? So, yeah. All right. So let's talk about how does CPAT empower our clients to do that. So I'm going to go over, Stephen, and I'm going to show a little bit about CPAT's. We talked about CPAT's courseware, right? And in that courseware, we have aircraft systems for cabin crew specifically designed, and Stephen built those. We have a whole library of cabin crew safety courses, which is continually expanding, as we talked about. And then we have some 3D environment training tools, such as a three-dimensional cabin or a 3D doors that are coming. Those are being built by our software team. But in regards to that courseware, I want to create a pre-studied curriculum. I can do a number of things with Invent. One, I can take CPAT's courseware and put that into a pre-study curriculum, aircraft systems, all those general subjects. I can actually modify those. So if you don't like the way Stephen, I don't mean to say it that way. If we all have training cultures at our airlines, right? And most of our airlines are highly experienced in the way they want certain things trained, such as, first aid or cabin safety or, cabin safety demonstration. The way that Stephen designed it is from a wealth of experience that follows regulatory requirements for each subject. But you may say, as the airline, I want to, this has to match the way our culture teaches first aid, for example. So CPAT Invent empowers our clients to modify our courseware in any way they want. You can change the narrative, you can change the text, you can change the images, you can add or remove slides. And I'll do a quick show of that for you. You can also create new material inside CPAT Invent using CPAT's imagery and material. So let's say I'm going to do a pre-study curriculum, Stephen, and I'm going to include in there CPAT's aircraft system courses. I'm going to include in there CPAT's first aid course, but I'm going to change it to match my airline's culture. And then I'm also going to create my own, let's say, cabin etiquette course or flight attendant professionalism course. And I can do that quickly inside of CPAT Invent. And also I can upload, I might have created a PowerPoint course over here, like you've done hundreds of times, Stephen, and I can upload that into CPAT Invent, put all that into a quick curriculum and assign it out there for a whole week. But Stephen, anything, I know that you've done this many times, but anything you want to add to that? That's how we can create a curriculum, take a day or two at the most to get this built and submit it out.
Right. One thing I like about it is the ability to customize. Maybe there's a different procedure and I'm going to go way down there. Maybe there's a course on service, on first class service or business class service. There might be several different ways from what I was taught many moons ago of how to conduct it. So the end user is able to modify that a little bit and tailor it to their particular procedures, which is a great thing. I like it.
Yeah, let's go over and take a look. So I'm gonna go ahead and jump over to the LMS, Stephen. And I am going to, let's start with what the students would see when they log into a curriculum. So from a student portal, and again, this would be branded for the airline. It would say, airline ABC or an airplane or whatever the airline would like to be the student login. When that student logs in, they'll see their curriculum down here. And I've got one that says cabin crew training. This could say cabin crew free study training program. When they open it up, they'll see their different courses or their different courses. In the courses, if you open that up, there's a list of subjects, and the subjects have or subjects or lessons, and in the subjects are slides, right? So as we go along here, I'm going to show you how quickly it is to make changes to this so I can modify it or add or create new slides. So let's open one of these first aid lessons that you had done, Stephen. And so I'll take flight attendant training illness. And so again, folks, for those of you who haven't used Invent, you can utilize this tool to modify the curriculums that we've created or the lessons that we've created, or create your own lessons within CPAT Invent. So I'm going to go ahead and start this lesson here so we can see what it looks like.
Passengers bring with them their physical and mental health conditions, and flight attendants are expected to provide first aid for sick passengers.
So as CPAT lessons always do, they start with an introduction.
By the end of this lesson,
followed by a objective page, and then we go into
to
our
begin,
scenarios.
imagine this scenario. It is 90 minutes into a 4-hour flight, and drinks and snacks have been served. As you walk down the
So Stephen has built scenarios in this one, and
The
so I'm
first
going to go
section of
in
the
and
lesson.
show you how to modify quickly this first aid course. As an example, let's say I'm an airline and I like this, but I want to make changes, right? So let me go ahead and jump out of the student portal, and I'm going to go over here to the admin portal, and I'm going to modify that lesson real quick. And so I'm going to log in as an administrator. I'm going to go ahead and go to lessons. I'm going to check first aid. And I said first aid illness. I'm going to go ahead and create a new version of that because I want to create it for my airline. And now what's going to happen is the system is going to create me a new lesson called first aid illness. And it just takes a second for it to make that transfer over. And give me just a second. Let's see. There it is, first aid illness. So what it's done is Stephen has duplicated my previous lesson, and now it's opening this lesson. And so I can save it as a new version. Let's say now I'm going to call this ABC Airlines First Aid Illness Lesson Course. And I'm going to go down to that second slide, or that slide that we were talking about, which is the scenario. And as we talked about, we have a narrative that is in regard to the scenario. I can, at this point, I can add slides by just coming up here and selecting a slide format, pictures and graphs. I can add PDFs, I can add videos, I can add anything I want. I can change slides. I can reorder them. I can add or delete them quickly, or I can, well, that, he really liked what I was saying there. So let's go back to our, but what we're talking about is a person on the airplane that's having a panic attack. In this situation, I can even change the imagery by adding my own image or utilizing any of the over 2,000 pages of images that I have that CPAT has provided in the image library. But in this case, I just want to change the narration. So I'm going to go on down here, and I'm going to say the first section of this lesson covers how to handle common physical and mental illness passengers may be experienced. Let's say on a flight to Tokyo. And just something as simple as that. I want to come in here and I want to quickly re-narrate that. I'm going to tell it, go ahead and give me a new text to speech on this. I'm going to say, let's use it in English. I'm going to select the same speech that we were using before, and I'm going to go ahead and tell it to re-narrate that.
The first section of the lesson covers how to handle common physical and mental illnesses passengers may experience on a flight to Tokyo.
And so I had a little bit of a pause there because I forgot to get rid of this, forgot to get rid of that period. And now it would actually be the way we wanted it, which would be there.
The first section of the lesson covers how to handle common physical and mental illnesses passengers may experience on a flight to Tokyo.
So as quickly as that, I'm able to re-narrate it. English is the aviation language, but let's say we have special speakers. I can do this in over 100 different languages that I may want to convert this. I can convert the text and the audio to that. So very, very quickly am I able to do that and create new lessons. So that's how I would modify that that material. Stephen, anything you want to add on how quickly and easy we can do that?
It's great. You could even change some of the images. You could change the graphics. You could make, instead of the gentleman we see here, we might have a child who's also a little bit of motion sickness. I mean, the possibilities are almost limitless. You can add your text. You could add several different photos. You could add a diagram if you need to. It's a great product.
Absolutely. And then I can, once I have my lessons identified, well, let's say I want to add cabin crew, I want to add, aircraft systems. I want to add, some of the general subjects that CPAT has created. I want to add my own. I can then now go in here and quickly create a new curriculum and drag all of those courses in. Let's say it's flight attendant candidate testing curriculum, and then so I can do this very quickly with CPAT and make those assignments. As we also mentioned, we've got the aircraft systems, we've got general subject or cabin safety subjects in our library, but you also have the ability to create cabin familiarization lessons where there will be hotspots, which are, spots that I can interact with in the cabin, and I can quickly go in and learn the location of, let's say, safety items, or I can follow a process to pre-flight a cabin. And so let me show you what that looks like. And it's probably quicker for me to show you in a video format. So let me jump on over here and show that.
In this video, we will demonstrate how easy it is to create three-dimensional cabin lessons that will provide students with an interactive and immersive training experience. With this tool, CPAT Invent allows you to quickly and easily develop a 3D training experience. Students will be able to interact and become familiar with your cabins using their current devices versus spending limited training funding on expensive VR equipment. In addition, administrators can develop unlimited training scenarios that are specifically designed for your airline. Let me show you how easy it is. After logging into CPAT Invent, simply create a new lesson by clicking on this plus sign to create a lesson with a title and a few other fields that are already populated here for our demo purposes. Now that the lesson is created, create a 3D cabin page for the desired fleet. This takes us to the 3D cabin, where we now need to describe the objectives for the students and create the desired hotspots. This 3D environment allows more than one hotspot, but for today we'll just be demonstrating a single hotspot, which is to locate the fire extinguisher. Now define what you would like the student to do once they select the hotspot. Because the hotspots in the lesson are interactive, click on the interactive activity icon to tell the lesson that the hotspot is an interactive graphic. Now select a Halon fire extinguisher from the CPAT Invent Aviation Asset Library. Next, add a smaller hotspot to your current image by creating a green box where you would like the student to click. Then create a task such as asking the student to check the gauge of the fire extinguisher. Now that the fire extinguisher hotspot and objectives have been created, we are ready to place the hotspot in the right location inside the cabin. Today, we will be placing it in the overhead bin near door number 1, where the Halon fire extinguisher is typically located. Once the hotspot is placed in your desired location, we are ready to save the lesson and generate a preview. Students are now able to move about the cabin and locate the created hotspot, using the objectives on the right-hand panel to locate the fire extinguisher. Once students select the hotspot, they check the gauge inside the green zone, as directed by the task instructions. Now that the objective is complete, the student will be ready to move on to the next section. In this video, we were able to show you how easy it is to create interactive 3D cabin environments with different hotspots to enhance your cabin crew training. Contact us today to get started.
So that the cabin hotspot tool is a very, very powerful.
Flight safety and
Oops,
efficiency
let me,
also
apologize
depend
about
on the
that. Let
pilot's
me,
ability
get rid
to
of
carry out.
that. It's a very, very powerful tool that is customizable to each airline's training objectives when it comes to cabin assessments, familiarization. And when CPAT delivers this, the actual layout of the cabin interior will match or be customized to your airline's layout and configuration. So just a very powerful tool. So that's what our discussion today about scenarios that can save you money when it comes to screening or augmentation training, and some of the tools that CPAT provides. At the end of this lesson, I can answer some questions, but I wanted to give, or at the end of this webinar, I can answer some questions, but I wanted to give Stephen a few minutes to discuss. He just got back from a full week training at the FAA's Cabin Safety Research Workshop with many people from the industry, many airlines attending, and talking about the best practices and cutting edge theory and philosophy for cabin crew training. So I'm going to hand the floor over to Stephen, because we thought it'd be a really good benefit for him to give you a briefing on what we're seeing as up and coming in cabin safety training.
All right, thanks, Greg. It was a week of very intense training. And if you've ever heard of the Civil Aeronautical Medical Institute, known as CAMI, out of Oklahoma City, this is where a lot of research takes place for not only flight attendants, for aircraft, for pilots, also for a lot of human factors. So if there's any kind of a regulation that comes down the pike that needs to be changed, they have to do several years of human factors research to determine whether or not this regulation should be changed. So being there for an entire week, I was able to experience ditching. We did some evacuations. We did some firefighting. We've done some studies and tests on some biodynamics. I'll get into those here in just a second. But here's what we're able to find in talking with the FAA cabin safety inspectors, the researchers, the PhDs that are up there as well, and industry colleagues over dinner. What we found out is passengers are really ignoring their pre-departure safety briefings. Even though we give them a safety video, we do an in-person pre-departure safety briefing, they have those safety cards. No one is really paying attention to that. That's creating a safety of flight issue. Also, with cabin crew fatigue is continuing to be a problem with these now ultra long haul flights. I think one airline is able to do from Sydney to JFK nonstop, approaching about 19 hours. And they're realizing, even with augmented crews, that at the end of that flight, the last couple of hours, that cabin crew fatigue is still a problem, irrespective of having these very nice crew rest facilities. As far as ditching and water survival, excuse me, a lot of those procedures are changing. They were last researched back in the 1960s, and the industry realized there's a need for us to revisit water landings, water survival, ditching. I'll go into those here in just a little bit. Also, for the evacuation procedures, going down the escape slides, going down the wing, going down the overwing exits, a lot of those procedures are changing. One of the big issues with the latest round of aircraft evacuations is passengers tend to bring all of their personal effects from the overhead bin and evacuate with that. And that's causing some issues of getting everybody out of the aircraft safely. And also the lithium-ion battery fires. Now that the average person, and we learned this while we were there, the average person has 5 lithium-ion battery powered devices on their person at any given time. So you can imagine an Airbus A350 or a 380 or a 777 with 300 passengers. Just do the math. And the dangers of these lithium-ion battery fires and the issues in fighting those now are off the charts. So I'll give you a little bit of update on that here in just a couple of seconds.
And I'm going to move on, and I know we've got to move kind of quickly through the rest of the slides, Stephen. When you look at these subjects and your expertise on them, we want to make sure that everybody understands our courses will start to incorporate what we're learning at these webinars. So our courses will be updated with a lot of this information. So wanted to make sure you knew that we're doing this for two purposes. One, to inform our clients, but two, to make sure our cabin safety courses are as up to date and cutting edge as possible.
Exactly. So one of the things we talked about was for biodynamics, and the FAA has a great cabin simulator. They have a couple, as a matter of fact. This one's called a Flex Sim. It's able to pitch up and down, simulate a landing gear collapse, and they're able to do a little bit of research. So the FAA was asked to come up with 500 people. These are non-airline people. There are people off the street, various age brackets, various demographics, genders, and so on. And they were able to watch a safety video. And after the safety video, they were put into a simulated flight and had a rapid decompression where the mask dropped. We had the rubber jungle. And the FAA learned through several of these events back to back, 72% could not don the mask correctly. Even after watching a safety video, watching the flight attendant demonstrate it, they still could not, 72% could not don a mask. And that is a safety of flight issue. And this came out from one of the airlines that had an explosive decompression. The mask dropped and people had the mask just on their mouth, not on their mouth and nose. So that raised some eyebrows during the investigation. So the NTSB tasked the FAA to do research. How can we better explain how to use oxygen masks and so on? They had another group of 500 people, 10 groups of 50 each. They were shown the same video and they had a simulated water landing or ditching. 77% of those who participated could not put on a life jacket in a seated position. And the FAA is wondering why, what's causing this? Because when we demonstrate the safety video, we're doing it standing up. We're not doing it sitting down. So the biodynamics are a little bit different. So based on all this research, they are wondering if the videos and safety demonstrations should be somehow modified to show how to don a life jacket in a seated position.
Yeah. And so
Another
Stephen,
group, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. So when we're talking about CAMI, what's really interesting to me is it's I know we refer to the FAA a lot, but this is really applying. It's a full international group at the workshop. You have people from all over the world, EASA Airlines,
And we did.
ICAO-based rules airlines, and so I know that we're moving on time here. So if you wouldn't mind, Stephen, I'll take you to the next subject.
Okay, go right ahead. Okay, for cabin crew fatigue, take a look at some of these figures here. That lack of quality of sleep affects 95% of cabin crew. And if you're accustomed to getting 8 hours of sleep and you have only now 7 hours of sleep, cumulative, that equals to having 1 ounce of alcohol. And these are, again, research over at CAMI. The worst fatigue that occurs is a transcontinental flight of about 5 hours overnight. When you land and you arrive after flying all night from California to New York, your functionality, if you will, equals to having 2 or 3 ounces of alcohol per hour. That is how much the fatigue affects you. They're even talking about a 14.5+ hour flight. Even with augmented crews, you're in a crew rest. If you sleep 4 hours and come out of the crew rest, you have what's known as an equal blood alcohol level of 0.12, and it's 0.13 if it's nighttime. So if you're a 6-hour sleeper and you normally have 8 hours, when you wake up, you have a 0.05 equal blood alcohol level, and you can kind of see for 4 hours. So they're talking about how do we alleviate a lot of these fatigues with cabin crew, and they're thinking the crew rest. Well, the crew rest could be a noisy place. There's one airline that had the crew rest installed above the mid-cabin lavatories. Every time a toilet flushed, it would wake up a cabin crew member. So they had to kind of disable those lavatories and lock them out so they could get some sleep. So one of the ways to mitigate this, they call it preloading, where you're able to take several naps a couple of days prior to kind of reset your clock. And also on layovers, they want you to stay awake based on what your watch says and your current your time zone back home, and take those power naps. They really do help.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to seeing our fatigue risk management for cabin crew course that you're working on now. I know that it'll incorporate a lot of this material.
Oh, it will. Okay, for our ditching, we can't call it a pool. We call it it's called a research tank. And we had to jump off the wing of an airplane into the water, not only wearing a life jacket, but also using the seat cushions, the seat bottom cushions. And we had to swim back and forth, tread water. And we had to learn several different new scenarios of how to preserve body temperature and body heat, and different ways to set up a canopy, and how to even use a helicopter rescue basket, and even coming down to how we had to use, and we learned how to use trash bags from the galley as a flotation device, and also how to keep yourself nice and warm. So you can see here in some of these photos, one in the middle is called a burrito, which using a round life raft. How to bring in a disabled or injured passenger. How do you roll them in? And you float them above that little boarding ladder, and it takes two people to roll them in. You can see me, they were trying to roll me in. That was kind of fun. Also, with the basket, we all had to go into this basket and be spun around and be raised about 30 feet and then back lowered, because if you ditch in the water, you'll probably be rescued by helicopter, or if it's close enough on shore. They wanted everybody to experience that. And you can see here at the lower right-hand side, how to use a trash bag for both flotation and how to stay warm. That kind of surprised me. So the snake, the huddle, the clip-on very quickly is we all gather in a circle and we all clip onto each other with our life jackets. That way no one really floats away. That's something that is coming down and will be taught later on. The FAA realized this is a good way to keep people from floating away.
What's really interesting for me, Stephen, and I know you're going to be again updating our ditching courses for cabin crew. You know, I've seen you teach this course in our previous life at the 142 airline level. And so for you to say, I learned a lot from this course, and I've seen you teach this course hundreds of times. So, you know, it's great that we're seeing some methodology. I like this trash bag methodology. I'd be interested to see that in a lesson. Let's, I know we're trying to make sure we've got a couple more minutes before we have to go to questions. So let's move through this, but let's go ahead.
I'll move through this very quickly. We did 3 evacuations, one for practice, one for dark, one at a smoke-filled cabin. And going down the slides, it was interesting because with the door open in the Oklahoma daylight, I could not see the door or the opening with all that smoke until I was about 10 or 12 feet from the door. So there's a new procedure. They're teaching how to evacuate. They want you to keep low. They want you to put your hand on the back of the person in front of you until you get to the door. There's also new ways they want us to evacuate. They don't want us to be laying on our back and, you know, have our arms crossed or doing this anymore. They want your hands out in a seated position. If we had time, I'd show a video as to how that really is working out.
That's incredible, Stephen. And nobody was injured, I take it. So proper evacuation, everybody got through it healthy and safe.
We had 40 people go down that slide in about 45 seconds. It was amazing. We had going down 2 at a time. Really amazing. Learned a lot from it. I've gone down slides many times. I really have never done it from a real aircraft like that.
Yeah.
Great experience.
I know we're getting towards the end here, Stephen, so I wanted to give you a chance on this last subject before we go to questions.
Okay. Very quickly, they have a cabin fire simulator. We're able to put out laboratory fires, PED fires, laptop fires, and so on. And the FAA had said, we hear about fire containment bags or fire bags. They don't approve them. They're out there. You can buy them retail. Some of the procedures are changing. For example, real quickly, what if the captain is out of the cockpit using the lavatory and the first officer's laptop catches fire? Now what do we do?
Yeah.
And there's a whole procedure for that.
Yeah.
Which
All
we'll
right.
get to when we update some of our training material, but really an awesome experience. I encourage anybody to be able to attend this. It's free to attend from the FAA, but of course, your hotel car and so on is not included. But there you go. I'll
Yeah.
turn it back over to Greg.
Yeah, and if you'd like some more information on this workshop, again, it's worldwide. It's available to anybody in the world that would like to attend. Just send Stephen an email, and we will have that contact, or send me an email, and we'll get you the information for the workshop, because we think it benefits everybody, and that we're trying to be good stewards and pass on what we think is beneficial. So we've gone through a lot of material, Stephen. We've got a couple of questions here in the thing. Remember, folks, I really appreciate you spending the time with us today. If you have any questions, if you can just submit it through the chat here, we'll answer them. I've got one question now, or you can always send us an email, and we'll set up a one-on-one discussion with you, as well as a trial or demo of any of this material you'd like to see. Stephen, I got a question for you.
Sure.
So for our airline, we have a few applications that wash out during training in the first week. How can I utilize these systems, as you talk about, to help alleviate this washout rate that is costing us a lot of money? So sort of both the augmentation question or scenario and the screening scenario. Why don't you talk about how that could help reduce the failure rate of or washout rate of their new hires?
Yeah, so the issue is if they go through the entire course, however many hours it might be, and if they do not score well, okay, they have washed themselves out without really any of us having to deliver the bad news. I'm sorry, we had to dismiss you from training. Your test scores are not up there where they needed to be. So we can alleviate them from being in a classroom for 5 days. They do it at home over the 5 days. Again, like we said before, it frees up the facilitator, frees up the classroom, frees up the assets. And they could pretty much, I like to call it self-screening, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And again,
Right.
you could do that pre-employment or pre-class for people that you've already done a job offer to, or a conditional job offer to.
Exactly.
At this point, Stephen, we're coming to the end of our webinar. And I'll give anybody that would like to raise their hand or submit a question a moment or two more. But at this point, we don't have any more questions right at the moment. But I just want to say thank you to everyone for attending. My contact information is here. If you have any questions, comments, things you'd like to see in future Discover webinars, let us know. Our whole goal is to provide value and support to our airline clients and our airline colleagues around the industry. But I'll let Stephen sign us off. And again, thank you. Stephen, thank you for your time also.
Oh, you're quite welcome, Greg. It's been a great pleasure delivering this. And if you all have any questions or concerns, my contact information is on the CPAT website, and be glad to answer those for you.
All right, folks, thank you. Have a wonderful day, and everyone fly safe. We'll see you really soon.